Eddie Glaude, professor of African American Studies at Princeton University, recently published a creative, challenging, thought-provoking biography of the writer and social activist James Baldwin. Professor Glaude borrowed a phrase from James Baldwin for his title, Began Again, James Baldwin's America and its urgent lessons for our own. That phrase, begin again, prompted me to choose a Christian creation myth from the opening verses of the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things, he was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men, and the darkness has not overcome it. The Word at the beginning. The author of the Gospel of John is here borrowing from the Stoicism of the time in which the author wrote, in which this idea of the logos, the word in Greek, was an affirmation of a universal reason that governed the world, that permeated the world, and that communicated not simply with people, but creatively empowered them. Looking back to the author of looking back to the life of Jesus, the Gospel of John presented his contemporary readers with a moment of reckoning. Let me continue with the Gospel. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came for testimony to bear witness to the light, that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but he came to bear witness to the light, the true light that enlightens every man was coming into the world. Eddie Glaude presents a similar story for James Baldwin. Like John the Baptist, Baldwin in his lifetime retreated from American society, not into the wilderness, as the case of John the Baptist, but first to Paris and later to Istanbul. Baldwin was seeking critical distance from his homeland to understand, to come to terms with, and to challenge the racism that was distorting the identities of Americans, both black and white, including his own identity. But he returned to the United States to bear witness to the light and collaborate with Martin Luther King, Bayard Rustin, Malcolm X, and Angela Davis. In the last 15 years of his life, however, Baldwin died in 1987. The light that had been cast by the civil rights movement appeared darkened, to borrow a phrase from the Gospel of John. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X had been murdered. Angela Davis was in prison, and white reaction against change was accelerating. It was a time of reckoning. And in his last novel, Just Above My Head, Baldwin affirmed his sense of artistic and social mission. He writes, "Not everything is lost. Responsibility cannot be lost. It can only be abdicated. If one refuses abdication, one begins again." To think of creation as the beginning emphasizes our place, our responsibility within the story that the myth unfolds. Eddie Glaude recognizes this responsibility and emphasizes that we, his readers, now live once again in a time of reckoning, a time to be born again.
Hello, Charlene and Ishmael and Holly. This is a story from Zambia, and it's from a wonderful book edited by Virginia Hamilton and Barry Moser. In the beginning, Nambi lived on earth with his wife, Nasli. As God, he made the birds and all the animals and fishes. One thing Nambi made was different, and it was man. The first man's name was Kamunu. Kamunu liked to do everything Nambi did. Kamunu worked wood when Nambi did. He forged iron when Nambi forged iron. Having the man copy him all the time made Nambi afraid. One long day, Kamunu fixed a spear for himself. He killed an antelope, and he did not stop there. He killed again and again. Man, Nambi shouted, what you do is wrong. You are killing your brothers. So Nambi took Kamono away to another region. But Kamono came back. Nambi let him come to calm man. He gave him a place to plant and to grow things. Well, one night there were buffalo wandering around in Kamuno's garden. Kamuno took his spear and killed them. Then there were antelope who strayed into his garden. Kamuno killed them as well. One day, Kamuno's pot suddenly broke. His dog died. Then his child was dead too. Kamuno hurried to tell Nambi. But when he got there, Kamuno found his child unharmed, his dog barking and wagging its tail, and his pot as good as new. Give me some of your magic power, great father, Kamuno said. But Nambi wouldn't give him any. Nambi said to his aides, how can I keep Kamuno from coming here to bother me? They told him only God would know, and he, Nambi, was God. So Nambi moved his family and people across the river, but Kamuno made a raft and came over. Nambi made a mountain and lived at the very height of it. Kamuno found his way there too. And all this time, there were great numbers of human beings growing and living on the earth. Nambi sent out birds to look for a place for him to get away. They found nothing. Next, a seer told him to go find Spider. He did that. Spider found a place for Nambi up in the sky. How do I get up there, Nambi asked. You climb this, said Spider. And he spun a fine thread from the earth way up to the sky. Nambi climbed up all the way to the sky on this very long thread. The seer told him he better put out Spider's eyes or Spider would show Kamuno the way to heaven. So Nambi did put out the eyes of Spider. That is how Nambi vanished from earth and was gone into the sky. Kamuno said to some men, we must make a great pile that will reach to the top up there. He and the men did that. They chopped trees down. They cut logs, and they piled the logs one upon the other higher and higher so they could climb up to Nambi. The pile went almost to the sky. It was that high, but it wouldn't stand up. It was too heavy. Suddenly the logs rolled away and the pile fell down. The first man, Kamono, was not able to find a way to Nambi in the sky. But every morning when the sun comes up, Kamono gave it his greeting. There rise Nambi, he said, our God has come.
Mine is a story from a group of Native American nations called the Iroquois. What? Okay, it's Onoshoni now. It was Iroquois in the book. In the land above the sky lived gods who were much alike to man, who wrote myth. One of the gods had pregnancy cravings. There was a sacred tree in the sky that had been there forever and had leaves and fruits of all kinds on each and every branch. But the tree was to be never marked or harmed by the gods. The woman, however, wanted bark from one of the roots and insisted for her reluctant husband to get it for her. The husband, complying, was horrified when, pulling up the tree, there was no floor, but a large empty space below it, and doubly horrified when his wife, going to pick the roots, fell into it. Sorry. The woman fell through the sky, but found no ground, because there was only an infinite ocean below a short pocket of sky. A flock of birds had decided to help her and put her on the back of a helpful turtle. But since there was no earth for her to live on, the aquatic creatures decided to take turns to try to get dirt from the bottom of the sea, but they all failed. Eventually, the earth diver, a muskrat of all creatures, made it and succeeded, dying in the process. The woman, touching the dirt, it started to grow and bear plants. So she placed the dirt on the turtle's back and walked in a circle the direction that the sun goes. By doing this, her magics made the plants grow even more and flourish. She made a hut out of roots and gave birth to her daughter since she was pregnant. And they continued to live like that until her daughter was aged, when an unnamed, literally no one knows who he is, man appeared suddenly on the back of the turtle. The daughter, after seeing him, fainted, for she knew nothing about what he was. And the man placed 2 arrows on her, one blunt and one sharp, and then disappeared. The girl, later, would give birth to twins. One of the twins was straight-laced and right-handed, whereas the other was chaotic and left-handed. The left-handed twin decided he didn't want to be born normal. He wanted to be adventurous, and despite the pleas of the right-handed twin, he was birthed out of his mother's armpit, instantly killing her. The grandmother and the boys buried her, and from her heart grew tobacco, which was used in ceremony quite frequently, and from her head grew the 3 sisters, squash, corn, and beans. She became the mother goddess, for she had provided for all. While neither of the twins were marked as good or bad, the right-handed one always did things the correct way and was truthful, where the left-handed twin lied and always did things backwards. These two represented 2 types of people, the straight mind and the crooked mind. They were both equally important. The twins had a battle of creation, where the right would start and make something to flourish, and the left would make something to counteract it. And through this, they created a balanced world. Eventually, the twins made man. It is attributed to having influence from both, but it is uncertain how much was from each. The twins grew up and were tired of indirect duels and had decided they would face each other in a series of duels. But none of them could win. It was always a stalemate, for they were equal. They then knew that one of them had to win the duel and the other would die. So when the day came, they knew that the right-handed would win. So the left-handed picked up a stick that would do him no good, where the right-handed one picked up not in my notes. It's the one thing I forgot. A weapon. He had a weapon. And he killed his brother. And while he killed his brother, he died, but he didn't die. For as he was thrown below the turtle to the land of the night, he stayed and he ruled there. Whenever the sun was in the day, whenever the sun was up, it was the day, the land of the right-handed twin, and when the sun went down, it was the night, the land of the left. The right returned to the hut, where he was angrily confronted by his grandmother, who had preferred the left-handed twin the whole time, despite his deceitful nature. The right-handed twin was outraged. He was mad, and he killed his grandmother, cast her body aside into the sea, and threw her head up into the sky, where she became our grandmother the moon. He took reign over the land of men, getting the monikers such as the one who holds up the sky, the master of life, and the great creator, among many others. But both twins, in the end, were content, for the right-handed twin could see the world of man flourishing and could smell the ritual tobacco, where the left-handed twin was happy, for he could hear the chaos of war and torture. As all of these are equally important, it is a note that war was not seen as bad and was just a worship as well to the left-handed twin, which is why you have the warring nations.
This one's mercifully short. I wrote this myself. Once upon a time, before they're even louder. Oh, sorry. Better. Once upon a time, before there even was time, the universe considered herself. She yawned and stretched, shivered a bit, then took a deep breath. As she breathed out, all the stuff of stars flowed from her and spun itself into galaxies and constellations. She smiled and nudged some stars about, touching gently here and there, laughing because she was pleased with what she had set in motion. Her joy was in the smallest particle and the biggest supernova and in everything in between and beyond. For her joy was in herself and knowing herself and feeling her matter and energy flow and change in fits and starts, in long, slow arcs of eternity, and in ways we have not yet thought to imagine. She has no name, yet has every name, for every name is only a tiny fraction of who and what she is. She is all that was, all that is, and all that will ever be. She is timeless and outside of time and the reason that time ever was. You can give her a name, but that is a box, and she is both bigger than and unconfined by and also is the box, so why would you bother? To name a thing is to know it, so how could you possibly put everything into a box that you're putting into itself? You can know what she wants you to know, and not a whit more. She reveals herself as she chooses, whether you're ready or not. Blink and you'll miss it. Stare until your eyes are sanded orbs of dry scales, and you still will never get your fill, nor ever find the end of her. For you are her looking at herself.
Before there was anything, the earth was dark, the universe was dark, and void of anything. All there was were the two gods. There was Tepiu, the maker, and Gukumats, the feathered spirit. Although everything was dark, they glowed. Mostly Gukumats with his brilliant green and blue feathers. They decided to come together and create the world because whatever they thought came into being. They thought of the earth, and the land formed in the darkness. They thought of the sky, the sun, the moon, stars, clouds. They thought of mountains, valleys, trees, plants, and water. All these things appeared the moment they thought of them, and thus our earth was formed. Tepiu and Gukumats decided they needed beings there to look after their vast creation and to praise their names. So they created deer, panther, birds, serpents, fish, and all the other creatures that are on earth today. And they said, "Now praise us, say our names." But the animals could only roar and tweet, howl, bleat, and moan. They tried as hard as they could, but they could not speak at all. They chirped, they mewed, they roared at the top of their lungs until the noise was so deafening that Tepiu and Gukumats commanded that they stop. Disappointed, the makers agreed that they would create better beings, ones that could worship them properly. So first they made a race of men out of clay. The creators gave them life, and the first time the men tried to speak, they crumbled. So the maker and the feathered spirit were determined to create a hardier race of men. So the next race of men they decided to make, they carved out of wood. And these were stronger. They were able to walk and talk, and boy, could they multiply. But these men had feeble minds, and their hearts and their minds were empty. They had no memory of their creation, and when they spoke, their words were just as empty as their hearts and their minds. They were unable to praise their gods. Tepiu and Gukumats decided to send a great flood to destroy them. They commanded the animals that if any were to survive, they were to rip them apart. And a few managed to escape and fled to the woods. They turned them into monkeys. The creators left them there as an example to the next race of men. The maker and the feathered spirit thought for a long time about how they could make a race of men that they wanted. There seemed to be no perfect material to build on. Finally, one of the animals, I believe it was a panther, brought some white corn that grew on the far side of the earth. Tepiu and Gukumats ground this corn into a paste and formed 4 individual men. These new beings seemed perfect. They were sturdy enough to last, and their minds were rich with thoughts and feelings. Their first act when they came to life was to immediately worship Tepiu and Gukumats and thank them for giving them lives. Tepiu and Gukumats were very pleased. They said to them, "What do you see and know?" "We see forever. We can see through rocks and trees, mountains, and to the edges of the earth. We can see your entire creation with all the animals and plants. We can see and understand everything." Tepiu and Gukumats looked at each other and said, "Oh crap. Perhaps we've made these beings too smart. They should not see and know what we do." So the makers removed some of their vision and their intellect. After that, they could only see things that were close to them, and they only knew what they needed to know. They were no longer able to see or know things they should not. But the most important thing is that they were able to praise Tepiu and Gukumats. They lived on the land that was created, and Tepiu and Gukumats made 4 women as their mates. These are the 8 men and women that are the ancestors of all men and women today. Even today, though, their sight and understanding of the world is not perfect. I know it's a short story, but I love this story. what I was wanting to do with this today, there was no big, huge message, but some of these stories did have message in them for us, was just to kind of look at similarities. You know, in a lot of our stories, you know, we hear about the two brothers, one brother killing the other. And here we hear about a great flood. We hear about, you know, the God not wanting us to know what they know. You know, they don't want, like, to keep us from the knowledge of good and evil, which comes out in another story. So, like I said, I have a passion lately. That's what course I'm taking right now, is comparative religion. I encourage you all to just kind of look and see what other people believe, what they have to say to you, and it's all pretty beautiful. That's all I have for you today.